Welcome to the International News Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Denis Danicic. And before we begin today, I want to start off with a small disclaimer. We haven't seen each other in quite some time. I have not been able to make an episode of our podcast in about the last week and a half, simply due to the fact that I was recently hospitalized and diagnosed with a case of double pneumonia. I have been bedridden and have been having extensive trouble breathing for this time period. I do feel better today, and my fever has resided and my headache is mostly gone. That being said, I am still having respiratory issues. If at any moment I have to stop for a second during this podcast and simply catch my breath, I hope that you will be understanding. And finally, before we get started on our special report today, I want to remind you to subscribe to our channel. We want to build a larger community where we can have an open conversation about the global affairs and issues that matter today. Today is going to be a special report. We're not going to focus on the news or actual current affairs. Nonetheless, we're going to be focusing on one of the most powerful individuals in modern history and the most powerful woman in modern history. Of course, I'm talking about German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Angela Merkel in 2018 announced that she will be resigning and retiring from the position of Chancellor of Germany in 2021, following the German elections of 2021, which are occurring this month, September, specifically September 26th. So following September 26th, the German elections, after the different parties are able to form a coalition and choose a new chancellor, Angela Merkel will finally be retiring from her long-serving position as German chancellor and de facto leader of the European Union. She has had a long history and she has an even larger legacy. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's start with Angela Merkel's personal history. She was born in Hamburg, which at the time was in Western Germany. Germany at the time being split between Western and Eastern forces. Angela Merkel would move to communist Eastern Germany with her father, who was a priest and would take over a parish in that area. She would grow up in Eastern Germany, finishing school and in fact finishing a doctorate in quantum chemistry in 1986. For 3 years, she would work as a research scientist until the Democratic Revolution in 1989, providing the people of Eastern Germany with its first democratically elected government, in which Angela Merkel would serve as the deputy spokesperson. Now, this career would not last long, as Eastern Germany would finally become one with its other half. In 1990, Germany would finally experience reunification. Following this reunification, Angela Merkel would in 1990 go and become a member of the German Bundestag, or the Parliament, or for our American friends, the Congress of Germany. Quickly, Angela Merkel would become the protege of then German Chancellor and one of the most important figures in German history, Helmut Kohl. Helmut Kohl would use Angela Merkel for her youth and the fact that she was a female to give him a perspective on what German youth and what German women needed in a new and reunified Germany. Angela Merkel would use Helmut Kohl to learn how to govern more effectively, how to create coalitions, and how to succeed as a theoretical chancellor. It was a mutually beneficial relationship. In 1991, Angela Merkel would become the Minister of Women and Youth. And in 1994, Merkel would become the Minister of Energy, the Environment, and Nuclear Safety. Now, in 1999, Helmut Kohl and the Christian Democratic Union, or the CDU, as I'm going to refer to it from now on, the Christian Democratic Union, CDU, being the political party that Angela Merkel has been a member of, would lose re-election to the Social Democrats. in 1998. Members of the CDU wanted a change in leadership, and Angela Merkel would successfully become the General Secretary of the Christian Democratic Union. 2 years later, in 2000, the president of the Christian Democratic Union would have to resign following a donations scandal. This would lead to Angela Merkel becoming the president of the CDU. 2 years later, in 2002, Angela Merkel would become the leader of the opposition in the German Bundestag to the Social Democratic Party leadership. In 2005, Germany would have another row of elections in which Angela Merkel would successfully lead her party to victory, forming a grand coalition with the SPD, or the Social Democratic Party, with the CDU and the CSU, which is just a small sister party of the Christian Democratic Union in Bavaria. German politics is simultaneously very simple, kind of boring, though at the same time extremely complicated. Now, Angela Merkel would become appointed Chancellor, succeeding former Chancellor Gerhard Schröder. Now, this would lead to one of the most storied, complicated, and interesting chancellorships in German history. Angela Merkel's mandate from 2005 until, and it's still continuing, this year, 2021, would be defined by crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis, having to lead not only her people of Germany, but the people of the European Union out of various problematic situations and ensure stability at the global level. So we're going to focus on Angela Merkel's career as Chancellor from 2005 to 2021. Now, this is not to say that her political dealings from 1989 to 2005 are not interesting, but they are not comparable to what she experienced and to what she achieved, accomplished, or what she can be criticized for since she has been Chancellor since 2005. Now, as I mentioned before, Merkel's mandate as Chancellor of Germany can be defined by one word: crisis. To no fault of her own, her mandate was simply following up and taking care of one crisis after another. The most peaceful term of her mandate was from 2005 until 2007, 2008. Merkel would only have about 2-3 years to focus on domestic German issues before having to focus on the global scale and world stage. In 2008, the global financial crisis would become crippling to Germany and the European Union. In addition to this, it would cause the European debt crisis, which Merkel, as the de facto leader of the European Union, would have to solve. Merkel approached this issue by encouraging other European Union member states, to introduce a large stimulus package and large bailouts to not only secure the economic stability of many European countries and well-being of their citizens, but to also ensure that the euro currency would survive. Now, these stimulus and different bailout bills did not come cheap. There had to be severe and large austerity measures, which caused anger among many, as across the entire EU, many countries had to trim and cut their social welfare states, leading many people who were unemployed and relying on government help to simply be left with nothing. Now, nonetheless, the euro still exists today. Her response and her pressure can be criticized, but the European Union and its economy survived. That being said, since 2008, when compared to other countries like the United States or Canada or Australia, while the EU has experienced economic growth, it has been significantly slower than its counterparts. The European Union is a relatively decent place to live in most member states. People can find a good living, they can provide for their family, but it hasn't changed and the economy has not increased following the crisis of 2008. So that is one criticism that can be levied against Merkel and other EU member states that partook in the reaction to the financial crisis that was occurring at the time and the economic policy that followed after. The second major crisis that would affect Merkel's term as Chancellor would be the 2010s migration crisis, primarily from immigrants and refugees fleeing Syria and other countries to enter the European Union. Now, it should be noted that this crisis is still relatively occurring and it's probably going to become worse following the events in Afghanistan, but the major influx of immigrants from Syria and Northern Africa occurred between 2015 and 2016. Angela Merkel would welcome hundreds of thousands of migrants into Germany alone, and countless of other migrants were invited to come to other European member states, copying Germany's response to this migration crisis. These migrants moved through many countries in the Balkans. Now, while some countries are member states of the European Union in the Balkans, others are not. And these countries heavily criticized Merkel for having these migrants come through the Balkan route. Some of these migrants who attempted to go from Syria to Germany in 2015 to 2016 are still today stuck in countries like Bosnia, Serbia, and Croatia, causing massive criticism of Angela Merkel. In fact, European Union member states have stated that in the future migration crisis that could be caused by the Taliban taking over Afghanistan, that they will not be as welcoming as they were of the refugee crisis in Syria. Now, Merkel's response to this crisis was more or less negatively received. Now, that being said, her side of the argument has to be understood. It was not done simply through altruism. Angela Merkel was not looking to just help these refugees and provide a safe haven and give them a good life because she's a good person. Angela Merkel, as Chancellor of Germany, had to focus on her economy. And Germany, quite simply, was facing a labor shortage. Some people would say a cheap labor shortage. Many Germans are not willing to work cheap-paying, low-paying, menial labor jobs. However, refugees from many other countries are. Angela Merkel allowed these hundreds of thousands of migrants to enter her country and what she thought would be to join the labor market. Now, many of these migrants simply relied on the German welfare state, which was too giving to them and too allowing to them and providing them with things like phones, apartments, and daily rations and money. But most of these migrants did find work and have integrated into German society. Nonetheless, there has been major criticism that allowing this large number of people coming from a specific foreign region, following a specific religion, in this case Islam, into a predominantly Christian or atheist country, was an attempt to affect the demographic makeup of Germany. Now, we can begin to enter the realm of conspiracy theories if we follow this train of thought. So we're going to stop it there. But those are the criticisms and positive effects of her response to the migration crisis, which was essentially opening the gates of Germany to be flooded by migrants. Angela Merkel would, as mentioned before, declare her retirement in 2018, and she would begin to focus on domestic issues. Keep in mind that the global financial crisis, the European debt crisis, and the migration crisis that occurred would take away Angela Merkel's attention and ability to focus on domestic issues and her domestic plan for Germany. Much of the things that she promised on her campaigns in 2005, in 2009, in 2013, and 2017, all of which were successful, were not able to be fulfilled. To no fault of her own, Angela Merkel's focus was simply on solving the crises of the international community and the European Union at the time. From 2015 and 2016, she began to focus on implementing her changes and her new vision for Germany. However, this would not last long. As many of you know, and I don't have to repeat it, another major and even worse crisis than the migration one or the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008 would occur in 2020. Of course, I'm talking about the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic crisis that would follow suit due to lockdowns and the shutdown of travel and many economies. Angela Merkel's Germany and her response to the COVID crisis, both economically and epidemiologically, did ensure that her country fared significantly better than other countries in the world. Her approach was at times heavy-handed, but it also allowed for economic work, growth, and production, also allowing stimulus packages and plans to help the German people. It should be noted that since 2014, until the COVID crisis, Germany's financial policy was to not take more debt, was for the government to not take more financial debt on itself. Now, when the COVID crisis occurred, in order to ensure that the German people were financially taken care of, the German government had to enter a bit of a debt. But her safe financial policy from 2014 to 2020 ensured that Germany was able to financially provide for its people and ensure that its economy survived until the pandemic relatively passed. We're still in the pandemic, and there's another surge, but hopefully it will end soon, and most people do believe so, with vaccines going around and most people being infected at this point anyways. So that's Angela Merkel on the international scale. What can be said is that in terms of foreign policy, Angela Merkel generally pushed for a multilateral and cooperative approach. Angela Merkel wanted to integrate the European Union even more and to create a unified policy and a unified government. She also wanted to expand the EU. In addition to this, Angela Merkel wanted to strengthen transatlantic relations with the United States, specifically through the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Now, her efforts relatively were successful. The European Union, despite all of its crises, despite the fact that many people had become disillusioned with the EU, and they still are today, is still alive. It still exists. But despite that, one of the most major, economically relevant, militarily powerful, and globally important nations, member nations of the EU, would leave while Angela Merkel was Chancellor. Brexit famously did occur, and the UK is no longer a part of the European Union, making it significantly less powerful and relevant on the international scene. In addition to this, the United States, many people like to blame Donald Trump, who was openly hostile to multilateralism and would vocally and verbally in public speeches attack the European Union and attack different resolutions and treaties and agreements. They would blame Trump for this distancing of transatlantic associations with the European Union. Nonetheless, President Joe Biden would follow through with a unilateral approach to foreign policy. And George W. Bush was really well known for his unilateralism, and so was President Barack Obama. Angela Merkel took a very strong effort to ensure multilateralism and a strong relationship with the United States. However, this relationship has more or less deteriorated. While the United States is maybe under Biden willing to be a bit more of a team player, these relations are now no longer as special or even as close as they used to be 10 or 15 years ago. Now, some people can blame Merkel for being too approachable, for being too pushy to have this relationship. But on the other hand, many other actors were at fault. It should also be noted that while focusing on the EU and the United States, Angela Merkel missed an opportunity to face many other threats that do threaten the existence and the well-being of the European Union and global security in general, such as Russia under Vladimir Putin and China, who is now grown economically and is beginning to have imperialistic and expansionist ambitions. No matter the case, Angela Merkel's successor is going to have a very interesting global and international arena in front of them. Now, we've addressed Angela Merkel's foreign policy and what she's done on the global level. It should also be addressed what she's done on the domestic level, which is actually much less, and as mentioned before, at no fault of her own. Her priorities were simply focused on meeting international crises and ensuring global stability, or being a part of ensuring global stability. Nonetheless, Angela Merkel did manage in times of calm between 2005 and 2007, between 2010 and 2015, and between 2016 and 2018, before the financial crisis, the migration crisis, and the COVID crisis, to implement and institute major changes to Germany's domestic policy. Most notably, Angela Merkel would end compulsory conscription, or what's commonly known as a military draft, in the German armed forces. In addition to this, she would introduce gay marriage, being the first chancellor to allow same-sex couples to be viewed equally as normal or straight couples under German federal law. In addition to this, Angela Merkel would decrease Germany's dependence on coal and nuclear energy. It should be noted that her predecessor, Gerhard Schroeder, actually began this initiative to create a more clean energy Germany. But Angela Merkel, following the 2011 nuclear catastrophe that occurred in Fukushima, majorly decreased Germany's reliance on nuclear power, coal power, and other dirty energy. It should be noted, when Angela Merkel took over in 2005, only 10% of Germany's energy was clean and renewable energy. Today, well over 40% of Germany's energy production is renewable and clean. That is a massive achievement, one that was started by her predecessor, but was majorly pushed by herself. In addition to this, Angela Merkel would continue to cut the German social welfare state and would significantly decrease the unemployment rate in Germany. When Angela Merkel became chancellor in 2005, the unemployment rate was 5.6, not rate, but the unemployment number was 5.6 million people. Today, it's less than 2 million. That is a major success. And that's with a growing population and an influx of migrants. Now, it should be noted that the economic growth and prosperity that has occurred in Germany can also be contributed to her predecessor, Gerhard Schroeder, who, despite being a socialist Democrat, introduced major tax cuts and austerity measures on the German social welfare state that allowed the private and free market to experience prosperity. But Merkel nonetheless continued these. Now, Merkel has stated publicly that she wants her personal record to be criticized and judged. She doesn't want people to praise her as some great historical figure, but they're probably going to do so anyways. Nonetheless, that being said, she has stated that her greatest regret as German Chancellor was the lack of digitalization and the implementation of a more modern and technological Germany. And this is actually something I personally found to be completely shocking when I was researching it. Germany has one of the worst cellular receptions and telephone infrastructure lines in the entire industrial world. Some areas quite simply have no cell phone coverage. Other areas maybe have a coverage rate of 10 to 15%. And even most major cities don't have a coverage rate above 70%. It's really a major concern for the German people. In addition to this, the German bureaucratic system still uses old school technology like fax or handwritten papers to take care of bureaucratic processes, something that doesn't even occur in the European Union's least progressive and least advanced countries, such as Croatia or Bulgaria. So Angela Merkel's successor is going to have a lot to contend with and a lot to implement. However you view Angela Merkel, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, or somewhere in the middle, it is undeniable that she is going to go down in history as one of the most powerful, important, divisive, yet symbolic historical figures of the 2000s. She represented a diplomatic field that was a post-9/11 world, a post-American hegemonic world, where diplomacy was extremely important and absolutely crucial to the functioning of any region or country. In addition to this, Angela Merkel is going to go down in history as the only chancellor to voluntarily leave the position, not being forced to resign or unelected. Comment what you personally think about Angela Merkel. Let me know. Let's begin a discussion. Subscribe to our channel for future special reports and future daily news reports. Thank you for your time. Have a wonderful day, and hopefully I'm going to be feeling better soon. This is Denis Stanicic.